Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Cultist back again with another logic tutorial. Today we're covering the subject of traps and, I guess, enemies that immobilize you. Just real quick, before we start the video, I do have a little bit of a disclaimer about anyone who wants to make a request for future tutorial subjects. Please think of things less specific and more in a broad sense, like broad mechanics, because we can't really afford to make everything hyper specific and catered to us. Like if you want to, like, say, it's like I want a rope bridge. It's like we got to talk about connectors or something. Like a broad subject. It can't just be so hyper focused on one thing, because we're trying to make stuff that's useful to lots of different people. We're not just like specifically catering to only one person's needs with this. So if you can, when you make a request, think of broad mechanics, like instead of like, how do I put on a magic ring and jump over a high chasm? It's like, well, that's a bunch of different mechanics, and we have to think of them broadly. How to make a high jump, how to make magic status effects, things like that. Just thought I'd mention that before we start. Now let's get on to the tutorial. Anyway, to start with, we've got this sculpt here of a plant, which is going to act as our trap. I've got two sculpts. I actually went and live cloned them, as you can see here, to create the jaws. And I made a separate teeth sculpt as well. And I've made it collidable, but you could actually make it uncollidable if you want. It's not entirely necessary. And I made it so it doesn't collide with scenery or unlabeled, which this is scenery. And I've made it so the scenery doesn't collide with an unlabeled object, which the plant is unlabeled. And the teeth are completely non-collidable. I've also made a base for the plant, which you can see here. It is non-collidable and unlabeled. And it doesn't collide with unlabeled objects. That means the jaws can freely move through the base. And I've attached some bolts to act as the hinges. It's just a simple matter of going to the bolt connectors, attaching one here, and the other end on the plant that you want to move, and then reorienting it with L2 and R2 if you need to move it down. And if you hold L2, you can also, tilt it and, rotate it and such. But just so long as it closes nice and even, just testing it out, should be fine. I've also set them to maximum springiness so they won't do this thing. And if we make this invisible, you'll see this little sculpt here that I've made, which is non-collidable and invisible. And I just put it in the group to act as a base for our logic chip, or microchip, which you can make adhere to the surface with L1 and X, I believe. Yeah, just press L1, hold it, and then press X, and that'll adhere the chip to the surface. And you can open it up with L1 and X again, once it's stamped out. And the first thing you're going to need is a selector and a microchip, which I have labeled close. In here I have a trigger zone set to detect a label. It is a square cube shape, and the label it detects is a friend. both non-collidable and invisible, just in case, although he's neither invisible nor non-collidable, but I just thought I'd do that to make doubly sure. I've connected it to a node, and I have connected a NOT gate to the power of the node, which you can simply do by opening it with L1 and square. And I have connected the node to a timeline set to play once, which, if you've seen my tutorials, you're probably very familiar with the setup. I put a switch on the timeline, connect the NOT gate, which will prevent playback. I also have a little animation here. I'm using basic keyframes, but you could technically use a action recorder. I just wanted to make it real quick, so there's a getting ready to shut animation where the plant's jaws grow slightly larger. Then there's a closing animation. And I've got a little sound effect on here. And the minute that it's closed, it triggers this switch right here, this red switch, which goes to the B input on the selector. And the B input is attached to a microchip, which has all this various logic inside of it, which I'm going to explain now. The first piece of logic, and the most important one, is a trigger zone set to detect a tag, the tag being caught. And of course it's a cube. And I'm going to explain how caught works real quick. Basically, you'll see over here, I've created a little state of being for our puppet here called caught. It's inside a microchip. And it's activated by a tag inside the microchip, which is about here on the player. And it's called caught, of course. Very redundant, but it's necessary. And it's connected to the B input on a selector. And a NOT gate that, when the tag is inactive, will reset the selector to the A input. But the B input is connected to a microchip, inside of which there is a teleporter labeled Trap Teller. And it matches target orientation. I've put it about here with the Z-axis facing out. You can easily modify these things if you want to by just pressing L1 and square, and then just using R2 to flip them around to whatever direction you want. I chose to have it so that Z faces forward. And you'll see inside our plant logic that if we go back here to the caught trigger zone, once it's triggered, it triggers a tag called Trap Teller, which is what this follows. So if you look at the positioning here, we're going to have our puppet facing the screen when he gets caught. And we have this action recorder here. I simply recorded a basic frame. Someone was asking about this. I failed to mention it in the last tutorial, but all I did was record a single frame at the beginning, which was turning off the animations and the puppet interface, as well as the procedural animations of our puppet, which, if you want to see where those are, I've connected a wire to them that isn't normally there, but this is what they are. It keeps your feet from getting all, interacting with the ground during an animation, because normally they'll get stuck on the ground because the puppet's trying to interface with it properly. But I shut those off. You can actually, if you turn this setting on, invisible connectors, you can see everything that it's shutting off. It's also shutting off the change layer ability, because I don't want you changing layers while you're trapped. And it's set to loop, so it'll be constantly active on this first frame. I've also got an action recorder in which I've recorded an animation, which is just him wiggling, and it's set to loop, which will make it seem like he's truly trapped. And that's all for what's on him as far as this is concerned. Now let's get back and take a look at what this does. This is the no collide And that makes the plant's jaws no longer have collision while they're biting down on him. I just scope in and press X to turn it off. However, I've added a sculpt on the outside. Since he's being controlled by a teleporter, he technically won't collide with anything. I just did this in case. But I've actually added a square sculpt inside this group. An invisible sculpt, which is normally non-collidable, but when he's being bit down on, it's collidable. And the reason why I do this is so that if he dodges the plant, like say this, I want it so you can walk on top of the plant. I might put it higher up though, so it's a little bit, yeah, more like that. It also keeps him from getting stuck inside of it after it's closed shut. Like, I'll show you what I mean. He can't get stuck in it, whereas normally if it was non-collidable, he could walk in here and get inside the zone that catches him. But anyway, the action recorder has a single frame and is set to loop, and it makes this collidable and the jaws non-collidable as a precaution. And that's pretty much it for what the timeline, I mean, not the timeline, but the trigger zone does. Next up, we have this timer, which has the timer finished pulse connected to its reset or restart option, which basically means it'll just loop itself over and over again. We've also got a little animation for the plant's jaws inside a timeline set to loop. And that's just it kind of crunching or whatever to make it seem more alive. Next, I've got this little option where the timer finish pulse goes to a node that is connected to a timeline set to play once. Inside here, we have a trigger zone called Caught Kill. This is a different method of death, which I've programmed in here. And it's connected to this tag called Caught Kill that when it's triggered, sets off a counter. The maximum target value is 1, so it'll be instantly on, and it'll work as a switch for our sequence. And I've got a little death grunt in here. And I've, of course, shut off all the necessary logic for him to get killed. He can't change layers, he can't, you know, none of the animations are on. And I've got a death animation of him just shrinking. And since this timeline is set to sustain, he won't really come out of this animation until the timeline is reset or until he respawns, which brings up this little switch which is connected to his respawn feature on the controller sensor. Now that pretty much handles how he gets killed. And I've also got an action recorder on this very same kill timeline. And what it does is make the jaws non-collidable during the kill animation. It also shuts off this force applier, which I'll get to a little later. There is actually an open feature. And the reason why I've installed that feature is because I would like to be able to have the plant be non-lethal if you wanted to. Another thing it does is this action recorder shuts off the wiggle animation, so the plant's animation won't be active. And the reason why I did that is because I have some keyframes here that control a little swallow animation that I've made. I've set it to linear blend, of course. And I think that's pretty much all it does. It also, yeah, I think that's it. That's all it controls. So pretty much that's all you need for a kill. And over here, the finish pulse is connected to a node, which will cause the plant's mouth to open. And I have a switch on here, which is connected to the B input, which will reset the plant's state to open. And I'm sure you're familiar with these other things. The switch that prevents playback, the NOT gate and such. But there's a force applier, which I've set to 10% and directional. And I've set to push, and I've angled up the direction so that it's facing upward. Set it to 100% force strength. I've moved the zone down a bit so it won't fly, won't make the player fly too far. And I've got it set to both invisible and non-collidable, and it only affects a friend. Something labeled friend, that is. Another thing I should mention is that you're going to want to connect the A output of your timeline to the power of this chip, and connect the B to the power of this chip, so that basically the feature of it closing is only active during the first phase, and the feature of it opening is only active once it's in the B phase. That way you won't get weird hiccups with the, opening and closing in weird ways. But, yeah, you can actually take off the kill feature. I'm going to demonstrate the kill real quick. Oh. Let's make sure everything is running properly. This is the kill feature. But if you actually wanted to, you could turn this, just delete that wire. That would basically turn it off. Now we're having a bit of trouble triggering it. I'll widen the box a little. I can afford to now that I've put this collidable thing on there. Another thing we could do, real quick, is I might make the plant... The jaws being collidable, I think, might be unnecessary. I'm just going to take it out. It can work with it the other way, but I think it's not entirely necessary. But as you can see, it will actually let you go harmlessly and won't kill you. Which, it's like, well, what use is it if it just traps you and only lets you go? Well, say something's chasing you, then it suddenly does become important whether you get trapped by this thing. But I just thought I'd demonstrate how you could get out of it if you only wanted the trap to be a temporary nuisance and not something that actually kills you. You could also add a little spit sound, I guess, if you wanted to. Let's see if we can find a spitting sound. Oh, that's strange. Didn't seem to play. Could be the limitations of the sound size. If we just turn off the auto 3D... what is that called? Panning. Yeah, that worked. Anyway, that's pretty much how to make trap logic. It could be anything from a sticky floor where you get your feet stuck. Could be like ice or something. Could be a net trap. Could be anything. Anything that can catch you, and, this logic could apply. It could apply to bear traps as well, which was the original request by one of our viewers, which I tried to turn into a useful piece of logic for everybody. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.